Hello and welcome to Candidates on the Clock, sponsored by the Newton Chamber of Commerce. I'm your host, Lanier Sims. Today we're joined with Mitchell Swan, that is running for U.S. House, District 10. Mitchell, can you give us a little bit more background about you?
Yeah, sure, Lanier, and thank you for having me. My name is Colonel Mitchell Swan. I'm a 30-year Marine Corps veteran of the Marine Corps, obviously, and a 27-year resident of Georgia, and the 10th District specifically. I came into the Marines under Ronald Reagan, and I got out under Donald Trump. And so that's a long period of time. And over those 3 decades, I served this nation and fought for it since 1987. I was in the first Gulf War. And so I feel like I have skin in the game like a lot of veterans. And I see that the country's really changing a great deal. When people ask me, why do you serve? I deployed from my children for a total since 9/11, 6 years away from my family. And you only do that if you really believe in something. And one of the things I always believed is that we are a nation, not just grounded, but I mean founded on individual liberty. That means you can say what you want to say, pray how you want to pray, love who you want to love, even if it offends me, and we'll all get along at the end of the day. We're all quirky as Americans, but something's changed, right? I mean, we live in a time now when comedians can't even tell jokes or lose their job, but not just a job, a joke they tell today, but perhaps a joke they said 25 years ago that we all laughed at. And so this woke culture right now I see going on is attacking Christian values. It's breaking our language. We have, 13 different pronouns now. We can no longer define what it means to be a woman or what it means to be a man. I got pregnant male emojis out there, and it's getting kind of comical. So anyways, the nation's changed a good deal. And so I throw my name into the hat. I used to write U.S. policy in the Middle East during the Arab Spring, helped craft that for General Mattis. And I got that job because 2 years prior to that, I ran operations in the Pacific for U.S. PACOM. So I know those 38 nations very well and the threats that are out there right now with China. So I think that I bring the chops. I have an undergraduate degree from Marquette University. I have a master's degree from Chaminade University, and I'm a graduate of the U.S. Naval War College.
Okay, well, thank you. As you know, we had citizens to submit questions for the not only Newton County, but the entire district. So our first question is, how are you planning to address climate change?
So when you talk about climate change, I'm not going to make you define that for me, but when we look at that, what comes to my mind is what we're really looking at is air quality, right? So people are worried about carbon emissions. Now I take more of a holistic approach when I look at the earth. Right now, I'm sure it could be a problem. I have no problem with electric cars being developed, people purchasing them. That's America, live the way you want to live. But I look at the idea of taxing air through carbon credits. Wow, now we're taxing air. And I think one of the things I want to point out to people is if we live a really clean life over here, but other countries are polluting greatly in the air, that's not solving the problem, because it's like being in the swimming pool, right? Someone makes a mess on their side of the pool, but you don't. You're still in the pool water with them. So I'm more concerned about the environment as a whole. If I could pick one thing to clean up right now, if I had that power, it'd be that plastic patch in the middle of the Pacific, the size of Texas. Or it might be the water that's been destroyed and the reefs from the Fukushima nuclear plant. You had 4 reactors there, and 3 of them have gone through the containment floors. That's a volcanic island, so that's contaminating the water. And of course, all of that wastewater they had stored, they no longer have the capacity to store it. They're throwing that right in the ocean. So I think we need to take an approach to the earth on how we're going to live. Now, carbons, I look at natural gas. That stuff burns so clean, you can cook with it in your kitchen and not kill yourself. Can't do that with oil, can't do that with coal. Let's start there. I'm fascinated by a quote that Einstein said. He said, learning about nuclear power, he said, it seems like a heck of a way to boil water to me. Because at the end of the day, all we're doing is making steam to turn turbines. So I want to say that climate change is on one of my top targets. I recognize it, but I think we've got such bigger issues right now that we need to address that will enhance the lives of all Americans. I want everyone to have an abundant life, and right now, they can't even afford to fill up their cars.
Thank you. As you know, our next question gets into the Build Back Better bill, and you know it's currently stalled in Congress. What provisions, if any, would you support in the Build Back Better?
So the Build Back Better bill. So that's a holistic approach for us to try and come out of this pandemic that we just had. And I worry when I see things like holistic and rebuilding society, social programs, things like that. That has to be framed out better. Are you trying to change my culture? That concerns me. And the other thing is, economically, what does that mean when we're going to build back our economy? Are we going to focus on traditional capitalism, or are we going to shift into something else? I need a lot of that defined for me to really poke at it. Now, if we're going to talk about Build Back Better as far as infrastructure, absolutely. Look at the port system right now in California. Do we need bigger and deeper ports? Yes. More cranes? Yes. More access for trucking to get in and do the offloads and get these things distributed quickly and warehousing? Absolutely. Let's do that. How about our airports? Absolutely. Widen them, expand them, maybe more regional airports too, for those people that are like driving 5 hours to get to the Atlanta airport. All of those are necessary. But I would also take it back to what we just talked about, climate change. We have a lot of pipelines that move liquid natural gas and just natural gas that are old and decrepit. One of them is Line 5. It delivers, I think it is, natural gas from like Canada through Michigan. And that's a 75-year-old pipeline. And they're like, you know what, just turn it off. Well, there hasn't been a mistake with it yet. Every inspection says it's good. Let's not just turn that off. And so I think we need to expand how we're handling and moving natural gas in the country too.
Okay, thank you. What are your plans to bring federal funds back to Newton County to make Newton County a better place to live, work, and play?
Well, I just want to bring it back to the whole 10th, right? And we'll see what we can do. But certainly, one of the biggest things that I look at my competition with, when you go up there, you are the most senior federal representative for District 10. These are 18 counties. And we owe it to everyone living here to make this an abundant life. And we do that by bringing back federal dollars. Now, I know a lot of candidates will run saying, I don't want to have any federal dollars brought back. We're going into debt. Listen, I've been in the government a long time. If they pass a bill, all of that money's getting spent. Mm-hmm. And so you owe it to the people to get as much of that as you can and bring it back. Have you ever been out for dinner and you're full, but someone's like, we're going to order pie. You're all sharing the bill. You're like, I don't want pie. Oh, we're going to get the pie anyways, and we're all sharing the bill. Now, if you choose not to get a piece, that's fine. Well, if they're going to serve something up that's a budget that I may not like, I'm going to take a piece of that pie and bring it back because it will all get consumed, and at the end of the day, our taxpayers are paying for it.
Right.
So,
thank you. What are your thoughts, or do you support term limits in Congress?
All right, great question. All right, I'm not sure if the person that crafted that's going to like my answer, but do I support term limits? Yes, I do. So I hope that makes them feel better. I am the only candidate that did not sign this term limit pledge that came out from the ustermlimits.org. And I even spoke to them. I said, the reason I won't support this, because you're making an oath and getting it witnessed that this is a pledge that you will uphold. They only wanted the terms for a congressman to be 6 years, 12 years for a senator, and then you're done. I like to remind people that real wisdom and professionalism in any job, to really understand it, takes somewhere between 15 and 20 years. You want to be a sergeant major or lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps, it's going to be about 15 years. At 20, now you really know your stuff. That's why older guys are usually the presidents of companies, at the 20-year mark. If we pass a bill like that, on year 7 after that bill's passed, everyone in Congress would have 6 years or less. Now, the guys with 6 years have the most experience, but they're leaving. How do you pick a Speaker of the House? Someone that has 2 years experience? They don't even know the procedures up there. And the pushback I got on that is they said, well, Mitch, certainly there's staffers up there that have been there a long time, and they're going to handle that, so we can just turn over these elected officials. Well, I always thought the GS employees are those unelected government bureaucrats we don't want running our government. So I support term limits, but if I was to, not having a bigger discussion of this, I'd be looking at somewhere around 20 years or 24 years. That made the most sense. Because then someone's been up there 15 years, they understand the parliamentary procedures, they're able to support or derail programs sometimes through those procedures. And so at the 15-year mark, we know who our next leadership crop will be. But as they get on in years, we know we have to be developing new ones, right? That will hit the 15-year mark. My question right now is we're so concerned about term limits, but who are we developing right now, nurturing and mentoring to replace these older career politicians? Because the bench is looking a little shallow too. So we have to keep that robust with talent.
Thank you. Next question, at what point do you think the federal government should implement wage and price controls to slow down this increasing inflation?
All right, so that makes an assumption that we can control inflation. And some are talking about, whether we can manipulate interest rates to control inflation. There is some of that, but it makes an assumption also that we can't turn back power. Now, understand what I'm going to say, Lanier. There's 4 things we need to live right now. We've always needed food, air, and water. Just needed it. But now we need energy, because if people don't have energy, they don't have refrigeration. The food spoils. If I don't have AC and heat, people drop like flies. You live in Nevada and the power goes out, you're in trouble, right?
Yeah.
We know that. Why would we take a resource as important to human life as energy and turn off 2 million barrels of oil? Energy is as important as food. And by turning off 2 million barrels of domestic oil production per day in this nation, that's what's causing the spike in fuel, right? We restricted supply, and that has driven up the cost. So that has a ripple effect. It goes into the food, the transportation, the manufacturing. It makes it harder to get things shipped here. And at the end of the day, we're still buying that 2 million because we need it. We're just buying it overseas at great expense, shipping it here, and we're still burning it here. Right. So the people that are concerned about climate change, I'm like, we're still burning it. If I wanted to attack inflation right now, we turn back on those 2 million barrels of domestic oil per day and see what happens to the cost of our lifestyles.
Okay, thank you. Now, this next question is, it's not your typical question that I think we see with forums and stuff like this. So would you support a know your customer law requiring social media companies to verify the identity of users the same way that we do with financial institutions?
So is that to ensure that they're a real person?
Yes.
But not to go into whether or not their ideology agrees with anyone.
Right.
I think if you're going to enter something with social media that's based on human interaction, that you should probably ensure that it's not a robot or a computer. And of course, now we live in a time of artificial intelligence. And it's crazy how those things can interpret our thoughts and write responses as if they're a person.
Right.
So yes, I would support that. But we'd have to have a longer discussion and understand everything.
Definitely. Understood. All right. What are your legislative goals, and how will that impact the counties in your district?
Oh, great question. So there's goals in the district, and then I have goals at the federal level. So let's talk about the federal level for a second. As I said, I used to write U.S. policy in the Middle East, so I would look at other countries and say, well, they're a hot mess. This is what they need to do to fix things, and work with the State Department for solutions. Looking at our nation right now, and I mean this very sincerely, there is 3 things that are priorities that we must address in this order. Number 1, border security. Got to tighten it up. Number 2, our economy. That has to be restored to pre-COVID-19 levels. And number 3 is education and culture. I call those 2 things because education does drive our culture, right? Now, why do I say those? So obviously you would spend some time in the Navy. So you remember those big ships you're on? If that thing gets hit by a missile or ordnance, the only thing the crew cares about for that instant is, are we sinking? Is the hull intact? That's all you're focused on. Once you know that the hull is intact, then you can focus on other things. Our national borders are the hull of this ship. We are getting spillage every single day, and it's swamping us, and it's going to sink us. Nothing else is more important. Now, once you get that under control, the next thing you want to do is the engine room working? Do we have propulsion? If we don't have propulsion, we're floundering, right? We go wherever the winds and the currents push you. I've been through that in the Tarawa. Our engine for this nation is the economy. It drives everything. It pays for everything. There's no build back anything if we don't get that economy going. And just 28 months ago, we had the strongest economy in the history of Earth. All right? So borders, economy, and then the last one is steerage. You know that if the rudder's gone on the ship, you're floundering again, right? Where we go, how we get from point A to point B is determined by our education system. Truly, where we go as a nation 10, 20, 30 years from now, what we teach our kids, those skills and competencies in the classroom today determine what we look like 20 years from now. You want to be an ag nation, you teach agriculture. You want to be in a technology-based nation, then you teach computer science. But you don't teach 13 pronouns, right? And you don't teach emotions over math. When I graduated high school in 1983, I'm a little older than you, we were #1 in the world for education, #1. Today, we're 25th in the world for math, reading, and science among our public schools. Now, we went from 1 to 25th. That's horrible. I truly believe the Department of Education has earned the right to go away. Estonia is #7, and people will say, well, Estonia is such a small country. The kids get all the attention, all the money, all the resources. I'm like, hey, you're making the argument for me. I have 50 Estonias. We just call them states. Because in 1983, when we were #1, that's what it was. The states were finishing up. I know the Department of Education was formed in 1979, but it wasn't funded, didn't have a building, didn't have a staff, it wasn't plugged in. So the states finished off those first couple years. But this is the product we're seeing from a federalized bureaucracy. And I think many people will agree with me that I resent having a school system waging a culture war on the very family values we try to nurture in our homes. That was a crazy long answer, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine. Thank you. That was actually our last question. So thank you for answering the top questions that our citizens did submit.
Great.
At this time, could you close us out with any further information you would like the voters to know about yourself or either about your campaign, and how can they reach you?
Okay, in 2 minutes. Wonderful. Well, I would tell people that I'm very concerned. One of the reasons I'm in this race is that I really believe that our most violent days of this war, these conflicts, is still ahead of us. I mean that. I think in the 18 months, I expect to be a large regional, if not global, event. I'm also very nervous that our biggest financial collapse has not yet occurred. There's similarities to 2008, except it's a lot worse, and I'll leave it there because we don't have time. Everyone in this race wants to make America great again, right? Certainly the Republicans. And I would just tell all of the listeners and everyone here in the county that that will never happen until we make Americans great again, right? Every organization, every country is only as good as the people. You want to have a strong nation, you need to have strong people. Strong men build strong countries, weak men break strong countries. So I'm encouraging people to get back to our Christian values, right? Now, I'm not going to make people go to church, but I truly believe that those immortal principles of do not lie, steal, cheat, murder, covet, they built the greatest nations on earth. Just those laws, and anywhere those laws have expanded, life got better for people. And anywhere they've receded, life has gotten worse. And right now, I think we're about the last nation of consequence still living the Christian life. And I think that's under assault. So I think that's one way to start making all of us better. As a district, I tell people, if you think we're in a culture war, and I think we are, and if you think that the state might go Democratic and that scares you, you don't want Stacey Abrams, if you want to live free as a Republican, any time that those 18 counties of District 10 work together, we can live as free as we want. We can make sure that the police are funded and that our communities are safe. We can determine what's taught or not taught in our schools. We can determine whether our churches or our businesses are open during a pandemic. And we can choose how we live. But it's easier when 18 counties all stand up together than trying to be one county trying to make a difference, because, numbers matter. So, Colonel Swan for Congress is how you can reach me. We'd love to have you check out our site and stay in touch with us. Election starts next week for early voting, so we'd love to earn your vote. Please check us out.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Lamar.